Hey, folks, and welcome back to Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we're exploring where and why we are leaking women from the water career pipeline, how to stop those leaks and bring women back when they take a break. And I'm here today with someone I worked with for quite a while, especially since COVID. She's was a graduate of Water Citizens, a virtual water leader lab, and has been an emerging leader in the associations, very active within Arizona Water, with water reuse, Arizona chapter of Water Reuse Association, senior associate with Hayden Sawyer, and has been active with Women in Water. And some of you may have seen Amanda Jones talking about Women in Water. So I'm really very happy to be able to welcome to the summit Andrea Odegard-Begay. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this subject in more detail.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right at that point in your career where you really see what's going on and have an opportunity to have a real impact on who stays and who goes and really figuring out what's happening in the industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm about midpoint in my career, and coming into engineering, I happened to come in with a large group of women into the firm that I was working with, and noticeably, they did not all stay within engineering. And then looking at leadership positions, a generation above me, there were few and far between in terms of women in the firm and in the industry in those positions. And then I've seen now entry-level engineers come in full of hope and promise and excitement that haven't seen any roadblocks or don't perceive any roadblocks to their career, which is fantastic. And we want to keep it that way and make sure that they have a clear path forward, so that as we see more and more women graduating with engineering degrees, they put those into use and stay in the industry. And then in addition to that, I'm also trying to work even on a younger level. I have 3 adult sons, but also a preteen daughter at home. And so working with her and working through the Girl Scout organization to provide role models and examples of women in technical careers, and hopefully to provide some of that influence and inspiration of what they can do in a time in their life where there's going to be, a lot of transition and figuring out who they are.
Yeah. And there's certainly been a lot of discussion and studies and everything about what happens with girls when they get into that age range. And I certainly remember middle school being a real time of transition for me, coming up from being a very shy small child, and I started to grow and I started to get a little more consciously becoming a little more outspoken, or just speaking up a little more. And now you guys can't shut me up, right? But believe it or not, I used to be very, very quiet. Yeah, I mean, what are you seeing there in the Girl Scout level?
So right now, I mean, we started when they were elementary school age and they're transitioning into middle school, as I mentioned. And so very early on, it was like, I remember trying to give examples of like, look at this team of astronauts, they're all women, or our mayor. And now this governor, I live in the state of Arizona, our newly elected governor is a woman, and we have had other women governors. So trying to point out when we see women in positions of leadership, specifically STEM, but not entirely, like the governorship. And my daughter's response has always been like, yes, of course. Why wouldn't, what's so special about that? And I want to keep that impression. So just always putting those role models and the kind of mentorship opportunities, having meet and greets. We went to go see a state Supreme Court justice and go to her courtroom and have her speak, women and women of color. My daughter's Latina and Native American. So just, again, having those role models so that she recognizes that there's opportunity for her moving forward, even though right now it's a given. If there are any stumbling blocks in the future, that she can see past that. And kind of similar to in, our engineering industry, trying to make sure that women have a voice and that we see women in leadership positions or who's out there. There's lots of women leaders in the organizations, whether they be private consulting firms or utilities or these national organizations that have a water focus, and making sure that they have a voice and they're speaking and they're sharing their stories. I think that goes a long way in retaining women and seeing that there's a place for them in the future as they progress in their career. So something like this, what you're doing here, and having these women throughout the water sector speak and have a voice and a face that others can go to and see as an example. So
yeah. Good point in terms of, yes, we are seeing more women getting into those leadership roles. And sometimes perhaps with a bit of a trade-off of, you can have these roles as long as you don't speak out too much, if you kind of play by the rules. And I think sometimes women begin to lose their voice as they get into the leadership. And and then they get to a certain age and they just say whatever. but it's kind of this, sometimes the implicit or even explicit, hey, you got to play ball. You got to, there's actually a study not a study, there's a brand new nonprofit that's popped up. And this was kind of, so one of the things that got me in gear on this summit was this woman popped up at WEFTEC who just created a new nonprofit and, claiming to be the first and only woman-led nonprofit working on gender equity in water, and doing all this water ribbon stuff, and got $250,000 from some family foundation, but it only is supposed to focus on young kids, and that's all we need is cram more women in the pipeline. And it is, of course, it is important to work with younger kids. We just had Girl Scout Day yesterday, that we had another speaker, Pamela Bingham, who's been very active with the Girl Scouts, especially Girl Scouts of color. And yet, we get a lot of women. I was that way when I entered the profession, this sort of, that feminism stuff, that's all my mother's generation, all the Roberters and Ms. Magazine readers and everything, and I have the right degrees, I'm getting the right certifications, I'm getting all the right qualifications, I'm going to be able to do whatever I believe, everything in Free to Be You and Me and all the other stuff that you can grow up to be whatever you want. And it's you don't always see the roadblocks, they're not as obvious as they used to be. And you don't always see them until they're like right there in front of you.
Yeah, so there's definitely twofold. The recruitment aspect, starting with girls when they're young, reaching out to universities, making sure that we're also in touch with HBCUs and tribal universities, bringing that diaspora of like women, but also women of color into the pipeline. But to your point of then how do we keep them in the industry? I recently saw a white paper from Society of Women Engineers that of the women, a large portion of women do leave the engineering industry, and of that attrition, only about a quarter is due to family reasons, to care for their family, whether it's children, or also, at this point in my life, I'm looking at aging parents and still having children at home. So there's other family commitments that take on extra effort. But there's still 3/4 that are leaving for other reasons. That's percentage. And how can we retain those? So that's part of why with my previous employer, I had, along with some coworkers, women, and then also male board members, that were really champion our cause. And what we saw as a dire need was to create a program for women within the organization. And the offerings that we had were open to everyone, not just women, but the impetus was to provide mentorship opportunities, training opportunities for women within the organization, so that they developed additional skill sets that they may need, but then also felt a sense of inclusivity. And again, going back to a sense of having a voice and how to use that voice, so that they would be inspired to stay within the organization, but also within engineering in general. So even going into how do you have difficult conversations with whether it be a client or your supervisor, and how do you negotiate? What are some negotiation tactics for, again, a raise, a promotion? How do you share your value? Like, you know, intrinsically what it is, hopefully you know that. And then how do you relay that to others? So things like that to help encourage and guide women not to get frustrated, or if they do hit a roadblock, what are some ways to work around that, and to also show that they're supported and a valuable part of, you know, the company that we're working for and the industry as a whole.
Yeah. And it's really valuable that this was something initiated by the women, led and directed by women. And, you know, I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of disturbing about this new nonprofit, that they basically told me, you know, initially wanted me to help them with a study, and then told me, no, you can't be on it because our funders only want to focus on this. We don't want to talk about these things. You know, we have to stay positive. You know, these are not things that, you know, that's not what the funders want. It's only about the kids. And it's like, we have to have that opportunity to have program, you know, these affinity groups, they call them, that are led and directed by people, you know, what are the saying, about us without us is not for us, right? And I actually, you know, had a situation, and if you watched a few of these, you may have heard this story, but I was the first woman associate, or first woman eligible to become an associate globally in the water engineering division of a big firm, and had actually been told after I was hired that the guy who recruited me said, well, you know, the real reason that we hired you is we wanted to be able to prove that a woman could be an associate. And at the time, I was so clueless. I was like, yeah, bring it on. I'm a woman. Here we roar. I'm a rugby player. I can handle this. I'm a PhD. And had no idea what I was in for. But, you know, just how, I mean, you're an associate now. Congratulations. You know, what that takes to become an associate. Actually, I don't think we've talked about in any of these, what that process is like. And how easy it is for principals and associates to make sure that somebody doesn't get that, if that's, you know, if that's tolerated. And that's what happened to me. But one of the things with the affiliate group is, after all, you know, the blank hit the fan, I went to the chair of this women's group, and she explained that basically a consultant who had been hired to look at, you know, what are the future trends and where should they be focused as a firm, said, hey, by the way, did you notice that every time a woman got to be to the level where she could be associate, she left the firm? And so they created it. They were like, oh, well, of course, women must not understand what it takes to become an associate. They just must not understand what the requirements are to become an associate. So they put together this little, you know, promoted up one of the secretaries to become an associate, and put together a little you know, PowerPoint that we give, you know, on your own lunch hour and all that. And sorry. And then it wasn't, you know, it had no authority, you know, it had no, it wasn't really directed by the women. It was, if the guys objected to say how a woman dressed, they'd tell the group to teach women how to dress, you know, that sort of thing. And so right now we're seeing all these new DEI directors, and, you know, are now being let go, you know, in droves. A lot of firms, you know, that it can't just be a thing or something that's just done as a recruiting tool, right? That there's got to be some teeth to it. There's got to be some accountability. There's got to be some self-direction and agency, for those that the group is supposed to be about.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had some of those discussions internally, because like most firms, we also have a DEI group, and really it's intended to be internal focus. There's an external component. This is what we're doing. But how do we continue to support our staff internally, and what what are those needs without us guessing or trying to figure out, well, this is the need of this group, and so this is what we're going to provide. But reaching out and really getting that engagement, so that I forget what your quote was earlier, but the individual,
about us without us is not for us.
right, exactly. So that criticality, and even within our state water association, it's the same. We have a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion committee. It's fledgling, so we're still getting off the ground, but that is a key component, is reaching out. If we're establishing affinity groups or having programs for specific affinity groups, we're doing this with input and something that specific group needs or wants, and not just because we feel that would be beneficial for them.
Yeah. And part of it is sort of a part of the consulting way of doing things. But, when you hear guys read studies, they often read studies, they'll read what, comes up on their LinkedIn about, from Forbes or Business Insider or Harvard Business Review or whatever, and say, oh, well, women want that, right? Instead of, hey, what's your experience been? And I don't know. It's so much of I'm worried about, if I say the wrong thing, they're going to sue or something like that. It's kind of just trying to figure it out by book reading rather than actually engaging with the women that they work with.
Paternalistic, like, I can figure out what you need and give you this resource, and that should solve it, without really engaging the communities that you're trying to impact, to see what the actual need is, to then develop solutions and provide resources. So we're looking at that too, as we're reaching out to our larger community and seeing, I think that there's a need here, but let me check in and confirm that my belief is correct or incorrect, and then let's switch gears before we start to implement a program that is not going to be much help, but is going to make us look good.
Yeah, it looks good on the glossy brochure, and especially with recruiting. And with younger women, and they're in a group. It's a social network as well as as well as a job. And these are friends and everything. And I had actually been transferred to an office to. As I realized after I got there, basically all the men had either been promoted up to associate or hired away by the clients. And so we had a very large group of younger women, and we're seeing that a lot. That, a lot of the women around our age, either, they're obviously Generation X, there's fewer of us, but also, 2009 was right when we were kind of getting into mid-career. It was not 2008, the economic downturn. And so we lost people. It was very easy. We lost people along the way, or people had families and there was no way to no firms were not willing to accommodate them, right? And so you get much older folks, and mostly male, trying to manage much younger and often mostly female in a lot of the firms, right?
Yeah, we have seen that in several firms. There's a large generational gap, I guess.
Yeah.
We've lost a lot of those, what would be mid-level folks now, or even engineers that were women and men coming out of school in that time frame during the recession with engineering degrees, had trouble finding a job, and then just never really got into engineering because they started doing something else, or were there and then were let go early on and never came back. But there is opportunity certainly for establishment of entry programs, whether it's someone that left early on or women that left for whatever the reason, but had began a career in engineering and are open to coming back into the engineering field. And so how, there are other skill sets that people acquire and doing different things, and coming back into that technical engineering aspect. What can we do to support that?
And that's why, we put this together. We looked at, there's been a recent report by the World Bank on gender parity in water, and they talk about these four steps in the career pathway. You've got attraction and education, kind of the early career, initial recruitment and onboarding, and then your retention and development of kind of your journeyman years, right? Yeah. And then and the walking the tables to becoming a master. It's kind of like the old guild structure into advancement and leadership, or alternative pathways. We're also looking at entrepreneurship, starting nonprofits, that sort of thing. But there's really a fifth, which is that career reentry. And so we've been bringing in, folks from things like iRelaunch, Untapped Potential. We talked to Path Forward. There's the SWE task force on reentry, and I, kind of curious about the resistance in, a lot of this came out of, these reentry programs. They started in the financial sector, from like Goldman Sachs. It was a boom time before the crash, and they needed people to. They were selling lots, and they needed someone to follow up with the sales, and then and then that crashed, and so a lot of this went away, and then the tech sector started getting into it, and all these computer coders, plus you got manufacturing and accounting and marketing and a lot of that kind of stuff. But in the public sector, and especially in civil and environmental engineering and sciences and related fields, it's like there's been this resistance to bring people back in if they've had a gap. That was one of the things that happened after the downturn, when all the ARA money came back in. People could hire again and say, oh no, we need people with more technical capabilities, and all these young millennials, they have all these computer skills, so we need computer skills too. That stuff out. So yeah, so have you encountered not necessarily in a formal reentry program, but people that have taken a break and come back in? Is that something you're seeing? Is your firm talking about it, or your past firm?
I don't know if our firm is talking about it, but personally, I do know women that have taken a break and are open to coming back in. But there's an uncertainty or question of, well, how do we even do that, and what are my chances of actually having gainful employment in the same industry that I started my career, because now I've had this time away. Or I've seen women that have technical backgrounds that have gone back into the workforce, but not into their original career path, because they found another path that I guess maybe was, in theory, had less resistance, and so they're able to try to work their way back. But it's been difficult, and those women have been away for 5 to 10 years, so a good chunk of time, but still have a lot of their career left. They're my generation, or my age, essentially. So
yeah. Well, and that's where I've been.
Offer, yeah.
It's been 8 years. I love the stuff I'm doing, Water Citizen, and if we get a huge slug of money in, that could be a different story. But it's something that's going to need to develop over time, and hopefully be more than just me. But I got that PhD for a reason. So, what I'm doing here with this summit, in a sense, it is like a decision support system, which is, my field was in systems, water resources planning and management, doing systems engineering and multi-criteria decision analysis, and bring all the factors together and everything. And, in a sense, I have that, this is qualitative data. Every single interview is a little piece of that. But do people see it that way? Oh, because on the outside, it's it's an event, it's entertainment, it's watertainment, it's something to watch, maybe hopefully engage with. Hopefully you guys are typing in the comments, give us your reactions and questions and comments. But there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
So, but I would need, as I think about going back, yes, I can do a lot of direction. I was frequently told, we don't want you doing technical work. We want you doing business development. We don't want you doing technical. We want you doing project management. We need someone to focus on that. We need to focus on business development. We need to focus on, you're good with communications, write the proposals. You're good with people, go manage the teams. Right. And I think for a lot of women that, I mean, those are important functions within an organization for sure. But it does often come at a sacrifice of keeping up your technical skills. And we need that mentor. It's not just book smarts. It's not just degrees. You need to keep having project experience and, build your portfolio, right?
Some of that might just be finding a good fit too, because I know, where I'm currently employed, regardless of where you are in the hierarchy of the company, everyone's still working on some technical aspect. You're still getting into the weeds of some projects. So there's no one that's solely focused on, unless you're not an engineer maybe, but that's solely focused on proposal development. There's a lot of doer seller aspect. We're going to go and meet with our clients and identify their needs and how we can help them solve any issues that they have, and then we're going to manage projects, we're going to deliver technical content. So finding hopefully the right fit and the right firms, and having organizations that encourage that breadth of what you're doing in your day-to-day.
I think, consulting, that was my dream, by the way. I started working for a consulting firm a couple of years out of school, and I saw what they were doing. I'd been working in policy and legislative offices and campaigns, and I was, oh my God, we're not just talking about things, we're actually getting our hands on it and doing it, actually making a difference. So this is, I started going back to school, at night, geology, chemistry, whatever, working my way up to getting additional degrees. And civil engineering and environmental management, all this other stuff. But and one of the reasons I got a PhD is because you have that opportunity to be, that go-to expert. There is that that Parthenon of people who are, those top leaders, and when they speak, everyone listens and everything. And I was like, yes, I'm gonna be up there. And that's so easy to get to those top roles, right? And not just principal and associate helping to run the organization, but being seen as an industry leader, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. And a lot of that I feel like comes too, though, with experience, and then within the firm itself. I wanted to touch on just transparency, and you had mentioned, as you're moving up, and I don't even like to say moving up, because at this point in my career I realized that it's not necessarily a linear trajectory. There's sometimes that give you new opportunities, develop new skill sets, make new connections. It's a little bit more of the jungle gym type experience of where you're going and how you're moving through life and through your career in general. So hopefully people aren't too focused on, this is the next step and I'm just going to go in this direction. Yeah. I'm sure that does work for a lot of people, but that's not necessarily the only way to get to where you need to be. But making sure
and that we're definitely talking about not thinking about that pipeline, just cramming them in the pipeline, then they go straight through, because right. You may have opportunities to go back and forth between consulting agencies and utilities and academia, and having your own firm, stepping back to if you need other personal care, child care, elder care situations coming up, and then being able to get back in. But you got to have that path back in. So right. But yeah, you were saying.
Oh, so what I was trying to get at was, as an organization, making sure that there's some transparency, like what is the requirement? What do you need to do to fill this specific role, or what are the expectations, so that you can identify too, is that a good fit for me? Is that what I want to do? Or maybe I need to be over here, and this is really the direction that I want to go in my career, still within the water industry, but what that path looks like, and then being able to take steps to move in that direction. Because too often, at least for me personally, early on in my career, I was like, well, we're just going to move literally up the ladder. It's going to be linear, and I'm just going to know, or I'm going to continue to develop the experience that I need to get there. And sometimes that's not always the case. In a lot of cases, that goalpost moves, and if there's not that transparency, it's like, well, this is what you need to do. Well, no, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. A lot of people bring up the old
things.
Yeah, a lot of people bring up the old saw about how, oh, well, women are less confident because they have to get, they only apply if they have, 9 out of 10 of the requirements, and guys will send in their application if they're completely unqualified. And it's like, I always feel like we're conditioned in that direction if that goalpost moves, right? Then we say, oh yeah, I'm really well qualified. I'd love to do this. And they apply and they say, well, you didn't get this and you don't have this and you have this. And then they are hiring someone who doesn't have all that. Right. Oh yeah, but he was reminded me of myself at that age.
There were these other qualities or characteristics that were not identified anywhere, but we thought would be valuable.
Right. One of the things that is really helpful for that, we talk about mentorship. People talk about whether women are under mentored and over mentored and under promoted. And there's a difference between someone just kind of taking a lunch every once in a while and privately giving you some advice. And we also talk about sponsors or champions, and in some cases even protectors who are there in the room without you. But someone who actually teaches you the politics of the organization. And it doesn't have to be a political organization, government, or whatever type of politics. Every organization has politics. You've got people, you've got politics, right? And how do things get, politics and procedures? How do things get done? Who do you need to work with? I mean, how do people find those people to do that? Are you helping, younger women to understand? Are you having the conversation with them? Do they even want to advance? Or is it just like, oh yeah, I like this job, and I don't want to work too hard. I want to, focus on this right now, right?
So I do have staff that report to me, and I make it a point to meet with them on a regular basis, just 30 minutes once a month, because I'm not necessarily working on projects with all of them. And the discussion topics can vary from, immediate need, workload, overloaded, underloaded, what are your needs right now on your projects, to career advice, sometimes solicited, sometimes not. But I found, and part of that driver was because I participated in a formal mentorship program at one point, which I didn't find to be of too much value. I don't think I connected well with my mentor. Nothing against that person, perfectly nice, talented individual, but just was not the right fit for what I needed at the time. And then there were other people in my career that have given me some of that advice, and like, how should I approach things unsolicited, that I found to be really helpful. And I would have completely maybe gone in a different direction, or not realized, what more I could be doing to help advance my career if it wasn't for them. So I just try to have those conversations with my own staff to help encourage and move in whatever direction it is that they want to move.
Yeah.
But that's like a small group in a large organization, and an even larger, right? So how can we do that?
And then of course you've also got something like water reuse. And one of the things about the associations, as well as things like Women in Water, is, for those, particularly for women who are in smaller firms or agencies or utilities or whatever, that may not have access to that, those groups can provide them with an opportunity to interact with women who they can bounce ideas off of. Sometimes it can be hard to get career advice from someone within the firm because they may not want you to rise up, and they've kind of come to depend on you as their sort of support deputy dog kind of person, or that to have an outside person. Have you been involved in any of that through things like the AWWA and WEF and Arizona, or water reuse?
Not through those organizations, but I know when I was in Texas, the Texas section of AWWA was establishing a mentorship program. I think that got off the ground kind of as I was leaving the state and relocating, and it was something that I was interested in trying to initiate here in Arizona to provide some of those opportunities. And it's something that had been discussed here locally, but has kind of had fits and starts in getting off the ground. And having a program that's available for not just consultants, but those on the municipal side. So how do you progress your way through a utility or in operations? Like, what is the next step in having a mentor for all the various fields and employment opportunities that you have within the water sector? So that's a big task to try to undertake and find folks that are willing to fill the mentor role. I'm just going to assume that we will have mentees that are interested, and then finding the right connection, because it's also a matter of having folks that can relate to each other or feel comfortable enough with each other to have some of these realistic conversations.
Right. Do you run across any conversations about some of the law changes, reproductive health sorts of things, whether firms are, not necessarily announcing it in public, because that has some, can have some backlash, but within the firm, hey, if anyone has, can't get care in the state, we'll drive you across state lines, any of that sort of stuff. You're in Arizona or back in Texas?
So I've been back in Arizona for 5 years. I would be curious, and we're right next to some bluer states. So I haven't heard any of those conversations right now recently. I would be curious to see what those conversations may be in other states, particularly in the South, but I'm not aware of conversations that have been taking place.
Yeah. As we talk about things like return to work programs, often you may end up with someone who is older working for someone who's younger. Are we preparing our young managers to think about having, the best team and not necessarily the next generation? Are we always looking back to, the younger folks coming up, rising professionals, we might call them, so we don't use the word young, but it's still, then they're like, oh, it was really only under 35. Yeah, I mean, I have someone on my team who's a volunteer who just got out of Wellesley, and she's already in her mid-30s, and I think she's aged out of any of the young professional stuff, and she's just, got her G-Sciences degree and brand new to the workforce, and do folks like that have access to to some of those support systems that are in place for younger professionals? And again, are they being taught to think about, bring on the best team members, the best resources, the best capabilities, and understanding how to manage someone who may be older?
Yeah, I think a definite focus has been communication and intergenerational, and definitely how we interact. I've had some conversations with my staff. I'm much more of a just pick up the phone and call me. Or this we don't even have telephones anymore. It's all over the computer, as I do that little symbol. But I'd rather have a 5-minute conversation than a back and forth email exchange that then I have to try to. I like to document what we have discussed or any decisions that have been made in an email so we can reference it later. But a lot of things can be solved more quickly. So that's just, my personal style.
Yeah.
But those have been some conversations that have definitely come up and I think a lot of it has to do with communication and how we're used to working or have, worked in the industry to this point, and then how we communicate information and relay information to each other. It's definitely been topics of conversation, because I've worked at a few firms over my career, there are several instances where a leadership position is filled with staff that are younger with some of their employees, and having that, and that's all, it's always been, so far as I can tell, it's been a positive experience, but a lot to do with making sure that everyone is listening and communicating effectively. And then in terms of young professionals, at least in Arizona, so I have aged out of that young professional category, but so I can't what the exact makeup is of our current young professional group, but their definition of young professional is both in age but also experience. So if someone's been in the industry less than 10 years, so maybe they are coming in middle age or switching careers and they're new to the industry. It is still termed young professionals, but the focus is more early in your career as you're starting out. How can we help you progress and develop? And so that has been focus. And when I do run into someone that's early in their career and maybe not young in terms of age necessarily, encourage them to join that committee, because that's really where we're going to start where they're going to have the resources that they need.
I think, as this, STEM reentry task force that SWE and Camp Dresser and McKee is still the only reentry program that we know of in the environmental consulting industry. And we interviewed them. They had 600 applications for 6 spots. So clearly there is an interest. If other firms were to start doing it, they could get some of that as well. But that's there's going to be a need to have some of that support in place for the reentry folks, and not just within the companies that they're at, but as we see it throughout the industry. I mean, whether the associations can have a role in doing what they do with the Leadership Academy, or what they have with with Duke and Wild and everything, and they get these classes through that. Could that be something that they bring in a class together, and then they can help assign them out to different utilities, so it's not one utility trying to figure out how do we do the mentorship, how do we figure out what skills they need, how do we check in with them, make sure that they're because it can be pretty intimidating if you've been out of the market for a while, and to come in to a new place, and at any age, it's not just for young people, that you've got to figure out who's who, what the politics are, how things get done, and and then are they going to expect more of you because you have all this experience, but at the same time you still need, are they going to expect you to just know stuff? It's like, wait a minute, everything is done a little differently. So even if someone can come in at a perhaps a little higher level, they're still new to the organization. Right.
How do you do that onboarding and kind of orientation that appropriately covers all their needs?
And come in with like a target on your back that you first time you mess up, it's like, you're taking the chance, So to have that cohort based approach, or that additional mentorship for the first 12 weeks or whatever, because that's generally what these returnships have, and hopefully it's something that takes off throughout the industry, because clearly there's a need, and there's people with degrees and experience out there who would love to come back, and it's just not so easy to do that.
Yeah, I can see that.
So great to catch up and get your perspectives and on the whole mentorship. And by the way, do you want to give like a 30-second how the whole principal associate thing works? Because I just realizing we've talked to people who are principals or associates, but we haven't really explained that if you're in a professional services firm, right, that you go through some hoops for a while, and you work your way up, and then eventually, you want to explain it? You want me to explain it?
You can explain it. So titles vary a little bit through, depending on what your consulting firm is. And then even those roles when you get to that level can vary a little bit. So what I'm doing right now as a senior associate at my firm is partial office management, staff management, and then, as I mentioned, still getting into the weeds. I'm still managing projects. I'm still helping design certain portions of projects. So there's a little bit of everything at this point, but also trying to guide the direction of what we're doing in our local water industry as for our firm.
Right. And you guys, I mean, typically principals, associates, and then later principals, like buying shares in the firm or being part of the governance of the firm, getting a vote for things that people who are not principals and associates don't get.
Yeah, and so again, that has varied a little bit
offer
that I work with, but general, in private consulting, then you can get to a certain point where you have, if your firm is privately owned, such as the one that mine is right now, shares in the firm, and then you can be on the board of directors at some point. That then gives you some even bigger say in the direction of the growth and operation of the firm as a whole. So
I want to make sure we got that in there somewhere in the stuff. But yeah, I mean, that to me, that was one of the funnest role. I mean, I've worked at agencies and other, university institutes and everything, but just that, here we come to save the day, kind of riding into town, the Seven Samurai, town needs help, and we just come riding in and we figure out the things that they can't figure. And we go riding off in the sunset and go on to the next town. And it's just, and if there's a new development in the industry, hey, we're doing PFAS. Oh, why don't we go after some PFAS? We've got some of this capabilities, and so used to do that as another firm. Let's put together a team. Let's put together a group. Let's go after a project, or let's talk to one of our clients that we already have a relationship with and say, hey, did you know you need to, look at that as well? And suddenly, you've got one project, next thing you know, you've grown a portfolio, you've grown a practice group. This is, there's a lot of opportunity for sort of this entrepreneurial pursuit.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, it's exciting. I love what I do. I love the industry, and hopefully working diligently to keep women and women of color in that pipeline. We've got the interest, even from whether they're from little kids through college graduates, and they're coming into the workforce. What else that we can do to keep them here?
Fantastic. Well, you're definitely an asset to the industry. Good luck as you continue your pursuits into at the national levels and with your own work within your firm and with organizations. Oh, we didn't even talk about Women in Water. So what's that been like for you to have that? It's women from all over the place, from the town, it's from wherever, right? And they just talk about
during COVID. Amanda Jones, as you mentioned, you interviewed her, so there'd be one of these presentations with her speaking, had founded Women in Water, and it has been fantastic. So it's women in all aspects of the industry, a lot of utility folks, other consultants, and just get together a couple times a month for 30 minutes and share some experience. Sometimes it's just, how do we self-care, self-manage, or we can also share work-related experiences and how do we address a certain situation. So it's nice to have a platform or a means for us to discuss and share our experiences and potentially provide support for others. But it's been a fantastic opportunity. To just engage and also network with other women. And as you mentioned, they're all over the country. So
right. And when you have those virtually, you really can bring in, like I've attended some of those, some of the Women in Water, and we used to host our own Women in Water leader circles, and following a format of mastermind groups with hot seats, and to kind of do a check-in around the circle, and then, hey, does anything have something you want to bring to a group, and what kind of support do you need, and then just have like open brainstorming from around the whole group, and then lead into a what did you hear, what did you get out of it, what do you plan to do with it, make a statement, have some accountability the next time people check in, what happened with this, And it happens that the guy who taught me this, Jay Fazette, is going to be in Phoenix at the end of like the 23rd to 25th or something like that for his workshop on how to do masterminds, this Mastermind to Millions. Like, so that's a cool format and a way to really develop leaders and you know, and have that peer support, because often we did some masterminding in our group as well, right? That often when you're helping someone else and you're giving them advice, you get that voice in the back of your head and it's like, oh, wait a minute, it's what I need to do, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here, and keep up the good work. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And please do type in your questions, comments, experiences, and we'll be able to follow up with you on the site where you are now. And keep coming back for all the great programs here at the Women of Water Get Real Virtual Summit.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real Virtual Summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.